Okay, we're here in beautiful San Francisco at Dreamforce 2025, and I'm here with Hannah Calhoun from Indeed. You are the VP of Artificial Intelligence.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about Indeed for the people that don't know Indeed.
Yeah, of course. So Indeed is the world's largest job marketplace. We have more than 615 million job seekers across 60 countries who use our site to find opportunities that are the right fit for them.
My kids are very familiar with it.
Yes. Yes. I mean, one of the great things about working at Indeed is that every place I go, the dentist's office, the grocery store, if I'm wearing the company swag, someone will come up and say, I found a job on Indeed.
Exactly,
So, company mission is to help people get jobs, and we're real proud of that.
Amazing. So, VP of AI for Indeed. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does your job entail?
Yeah, so I lead what is effectively a transformation office, and it is my job to figure out how we use AI to help every one of the employees across our company do the thing we're trying to do, right, which is help people get jobs. And so a big piece of that is certainly thinking about how does AI show up for our job seekers and our employers and our marketplace. But a lot of my focus over the last year actually has been thinking about how does AI play into our day-to-day work? What are the future of the jobs at Indeed going to look like? And how do we make sure that every worker at Indeed feels like they are ready and empowered and have the skills to be successful in whatever this AI agentic future is?
Interesting. So much to dive into. So I would love to, at a later point, go into the skills and how the jobs market changed, because I think this is so important.
Yes.
Before we do this, maybe we can talk about the different ways AI is relevant for Indeed. How do you use AI?
Yes. So you mean in terms of how Indeed, our employees are using AI every day?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I would say there's two sort of big categories of things we look at. The first is these sort of broad-based, we call them horizontal tools. So there are lots of things that, many hundreds or thousands of people do at Indeed every day. They look for information. They run analysis. They have to create content for one purpose or another. And so we have some, company-wide tools for those sorts of things. And then we have taken a very function-specific approach in terms of our strategy. And so we've said okay, in addition to those broad horizontal tools, we're going to need, specific tools for software engineers and specific tools for marketers and specific tools for folks in legal.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, each of those people has a really different job. And so they're doing really different types of tasks. And we find that often having AI that's really been customized for them helps them get sort of the biggest bang for their buck.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you choose the right tools?
Trial and error, kind of, right? So we first start by trying to figure out what actually is the business problem that we're trying to solve, right? We're a very metrics-driven company, lots and lots of data.
Yeah.
And so we'll say, okay, where do we see in the data that we've got a problem with a process or a problem, a customer pain point, an employee pain point? And I guess the first question is always is AI actually a good fit for this? I think there is, there's a lot of hype at the moment. And so there's this temptation to go just throw AI at everything you can think of.
Yeah.
But we try to go and say okay, what's a problem that's being faced by our legal team that AI would probably actually be pretty good at doing? Okay, then let's go out and sort of see what solutions exist in the market. We'll go pick one, we'll put it through usually a couple-month pilot process. We'll measure really thoughtfully sort of the before and the after. And then if it's successful, we'll take it and we'll scale it up across the whole department and we'll train everybody on how to use it. And so it has been, particularly over the last, I would say the first year of the work, was a lot of small scale pilots, picking and choosing, making decisions on which things we actually were seeing be effective.
Yeah.
And now we're really into the scale up and grow stage, which has been really fun.
Yeah. So if we look across the business, have you got actual examples of these tools we use for those purposes and they've made this difference?
We do, yes. One of the things that we did pretty early on, which I think has helped really ground, the work. I imagine you have seen that study that came out of MIT over the summer, right? 95% of enterprise AI pilots generate zero business value.
Yeah.
It is an enormous part of my job is making sure we are in the 5%. But we actually went through and had every department pick a couple of metrics that they thought were most important to driving business value.
Okay.
And then we have been tracking whether or not they are moving those metrics with AI.
Yeah.
And so legal is a great example, right? They said, we know that we play a really important role for the business, but that part of our reputation is that we're the team that slows stuff down, right? You send your product, your procurement request, your contract off to legal, and it And then it like enters the black box and it just wallows and wallows for days and days. And they said, okay, one of our key metrics is going to be, we're going to decrease the amount of time that things spend with legal. We're going to count how many days, which we were already doing. If something comes into legal, we're going to count how many days before we send it back. And they have implemented a set of, very specific customized tools that's allowed them to take, to more than cut that number in half, as an example. We have a lot of software engineers who write a lot of code, right? We have deployed a whole portfolio of AI-powered coding assistants to our software engineers, and then we track the velocity of their code, we track the quality of their code, we track their overall satisfaction, we track their level of documentation, right? And again, we're able to sort of, see the impact of the AI tools, and we watch people in cohorts so we can make sure that we're actually getting the results that we want to see.
Good.
So yes, sort of everywhere, as it turns out.
For me, measurement is such an important element of it.
Yeah.
If you get the metrics right from the beginning and you set it up and you experiment and you see the results, it's then so much easier to make the business case for scale, right?
Yes. And also it turns out that you find sometimes that you've made an assumption about, maybe it turns out people say like, oh, we're saving a lot of time, but then they're not taking that time and putting it back into anything that drives the business. And so it's like a cool tool, but is it worth the investment? Hard to say, right? Or, one thing we found as we've sped up all of our software engineers is now our engineers can write code a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
But that means there's even bigger piles of merge requests that someone has to go through and review. And so now the bottleneck is not the writing of the code, it's the reviewing of the code, right? And so now we think about, okay, can AI be helpful at that stage? And as soon as we fix that, I'm sure we will find that there's, some new stopgap in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, data, probably my top piece of advice for folks that are trying to do this is actually to be very particular about what you measure and make sure you've got a really good measurement system in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Other than good measurement, what are other success factors that you would recommend anyone needs to have in place? I guess that the standard ones are, you need good proprietary data that is clean. You need to have skills in the organization, the right culture.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to those? Is there anything you would add?
So on those two, I think I have two specific points. And the first is, I think it's very tempting to say, oh, we need to have good proprietary clean data. And so the first thing we're going to do is spend 12 months cleaning up our data. Don't do that.
No.
You can't afford to wait, right?
Yeah.
So you got to go figure out what is some portion of my data that I can carve out in Sandbox and I can start trying and experimenting.
Yeah.
And then in parallel, I should do all of the work to clean up my data, sure, right? But nobody's data is ever as clean as they'd like it to be, and that can't be a barrier to entry. I think the skill building in education is so important, but I think the place, I think often actually it's a place where people say the thing. They're like, oh yes, you have to educate the workforce. But then people massively underestimate how big of an investment it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said at the beginning, what we're finding is that, the function-specific interventions are the ones that really have the high return on investment.
Yeah.
And so you can't just be like, hey, here's a piece of AI. Everybody at the company just go do what you want. You can. But what you're going to find is that in every department, wherever you put your tool, you're going to have 10 or 20% of your organization that is your super excited early adopter explorers. And they're going to generate, you're going to have a beautiful Pareto curve. They're going to generate 80 or 90% of the usage. And everybody else is going to click into the thing every so often. And so it's going to look like you've adopted AI across the company, but you're actually only going to get the depth of the impact from a tiny, tiny sliver of your population. Mm-hmm. And so to really max out the investment, you have to get that additional 80 or 90% of the folks who, to be clear, do not want to be explorers. They don't need to be explorers, right? What they want to be is they want to be consumers. They want you to go to them and you say, listen, you're a marketing analyst, you're a lawyer, you're a UX designer. Here are the 3 tools that we need you to use, and here are the 5 most useful ways you can use those tools in your day-to-day workflow. And then they're like, oh, okay. And by the way, you don't have to listen to me. I'm going to get one of those, super users who's a peer of yours, who has peer-to-peer credibility. I'm going to get them to tell you that this is what you should do. And then you start to see that cascading increased use and adoption into the bulk of your employee base, which is what you actually need to generate the impacts and to be able to see the measurement, right? Mm-hmm. But that's really hard, right? We have 11,000 people. They have hundreds of different job profiles. They work for 13 different departments. And so it means you actually have to take the time to go into each of those departments and say, okay, what are the jobs? What are the workflows? Which are the tools? How do we train people in a way that feels specific and relevant to them? Which is a very non-trivial amount of work.
No.
Yeah.
So, and you've managed to scale AI really nicely. Do you want to explain the level of usage?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we track, I would say like that, the top dozen or so tools across the business. We can see how any employee is using them in addition to a handful of like function specific tools. It's a funny sort of cyclical process, right? The number goes up and down. I would say I feel very comfortable saying, more than 75% of Indians are using AI in their day-to-day work on a daily or weekly basis. We get funny pings, right? It was just performance review cycle. And it turns out that everybody loves AI when it's performance review time, right? Number goes up to like 99% briefly for 2 weeks in the fall and 2 weeks in the spring. But yeah, so we're seeing, 75, 80% plus adoption generally. And some functions we see even higher than that. So, more than 80% of our code committers, for example, are using AI coding assistants. And we know, from our research, right, and from the data that we're collecting, right, like we keep track of like how much time is it saving folks, how does it impact velocity. We also keep track of employee satisfaction, which is really important, right?
Absolutely.
More than 80% of our employees say that AI is like meaningfully making their day-to-day work better, which is a really good barometer for whether or not we are sort of forcing this on the organization or if we are actually giving people tools that they want and that they feel good about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The big topic here is the Agentic Enterprise.
Yes.
So we've talked, you mentioned a few generative AI tools, classic AI tools. How are you using or planning to use Agentic AI?
Yeah. I would say my expectation is that Agentic AI will show up in every corner of the business eventually. We're obviously, we're here at Agentforce at Sales, Dreamforce. We're obviously, users of the Agentforce system. And so a lot of the use cases that Salesforce talks about are ones that are relevant for us. But we're also finding, I think like probably like any big company, there are a lot of sort of workflows and processes in our day-to-day work in every corner of the company that are sort of like well suited to a little bit of AI-powered automation where the AI can actually go out and do a little bit of work and analysis on behalf of the user and then come back and say, hey, what do you think about this, right? And so, I don't expect, I think when you ask people, 6 or 9 months ago, they would have said, it's customer support and it's sales and it's engineering, right? And now I think we think it's everybody.
So what are the areas where you're applying Agentforce, where you're using AI agents, where you're using Salesforce technology?
Yeah, so we use a whole host of vendors, right? Salesforce is one of them. And we are finding, across our sort of vendor stack, we are using agents to help us with, like technical migrations and tasks that are more like maintenance, right, than creating new products. We are using agents. I mentioned the legal team earlier, right? We're using agents to help us like quickly assess and respond to questions about legal and compliance issues, right? So we can figure out like if someone has a question about a product, is it a product question that we've answered 110 times before and we're absolutely sure we know the answer is, or is it actually like something that's really new and tricky and we need to bring in the legal team and like have a deeper consult conversation?
Yeah.
We're using, we're using agents for a lot of analytics tasks. Big companies with lots of data. One of the challenges of that is always you're looking for a number and you're not quite sure where it is or how to ask for it. You've got your various data systems, right? Like how do we start breaking down the barriers between people who are like really deep technical or subject matter experts and the broader community of folks that wants to be able to interact with that information?
So when we started the conversation, you said you look at the AI, the technology side, but also you think about how the job will change, how people and skills will change within Indeed and for the customers you're serving. So what are the major shifts that you're expecting to see?
Yeah. Well, we have, I think one of the very cool things about being at Indeed is that we have sort of this front seat to the global economy because so many jobs and so many job seekers pass through the platform.
Yeah.
And we have this team of economists led by a colleague of mine, Svenja Godel, and they run analysis all the time on questions like, Are we seeing more jobs with AI in the skill set? Are we seeing, is AI impacting the number of jobs in these sorts of industries? Like, what do we think will happen with AI?
We see all the job postings and
we see all the job postings. We see all the resumes, right? It's a very rich, interesting data set. And so a couple of things that have sort of stood out from the analysis recently. So one I would say is, the percentage of jobs that are being posted in the United States, for example, that specifically mention AI or AI skills, so machine learning, prompt engineering, things like that, like sort of keywords, has gone up dramatically in the last couple of years, but it is still in the low single-digit percentage.
Really?
If you look at all the jobs in the States.
Interesting.
And, one, I think, hypothesis we have about this, right, is that it's true that there are going to be, because of this sort of AI revolution that's happening, there's going to be more of a need for the folks who build the deep models and the systems, right? For sure, people are hiring more ML and AI engineers, more data scientists, right? But for the vast majority of people, they're going to interact with AI through, the same sorts of third-party SaaS platforms or tools that they've always interacted with, right? If you're a sales rep and you've been on Salesforce and now Salesforce has Agentforce, built in, you're not going to have to be an AI agent. You're just going to be a sales rep who knows how to use the most modern, up-to-date version of Salesforce, right? The same way as you were a designer, you had to use Figma or Canva, and now you need to know how to use the AI features inside those platforms. And so I sort of suspect, so one sort of data point would say, we're going to see a spike in sort of these very technical, industry-specific AI skills. But for everybody else, the expectation is just going to be that best practice in your role is going to be interacting with the tools of the trade, and those tools of the trade will just increasingly involve AI functionality over time. And so we probably won't actually see that number go to the moon. So that's one thing that's been interesting. The other thing that they've done recently, and they do it every year, is they take all of the jobs in the States and they break them down into skills. So one sort of, I think, useful framework is to think what is a job? And in some ways, it's just it's a basket of skills, right? And if you're a nurse, you know how to put an IV, and you know how to do a bandage, and you know how to do intake forms, and you know how to enter notes into the, an Epic system. And they do this interesting analysis where they go and they say, okay, of those skills, which of those skills are most likely to be the most transformed by AI in the next 5 years? And, and will they be fully transformed? Will the AI just do them all, right? Or it will be a skill where we say, gosh, the AI can help here, but we're still going to need human interaction, human oversight? Or is it frankly a skill? Putting in an IV line's a great example, right? Where the AI is just not going to be involved at all. And then they take all of those assessments and they repackage them back up into jobs. And they say, okay, this job has, 80% of the skills inside of this job are likely to be moderately to highly impacted, or 15% of the skills in that job. And so you can go look in different jobs and roles and sort of see what you think is coming. And the headline from all of that research, right, is that something like 50% of the jobs that currently exist today are likely to have a moderate level of AI transformation. But that transformation is primarily going to be skills where we think there's going to be a human hybrid complement. So probably the vast majority of us will be continuing to work in roles where we're partnering closely with AI agents or AI tools in the future. But there aren't actually that many jobs out there where the expectation is that the AI could actually fully replace a human worker. So I do think we'll see a lot of transformation and evolution, but I think in terms of sort of absolute categories of jobs falling away, that type of impact is likely to be very small.
So if you look back at your own transformation journey, what have been your most difficult challenges?
Oh man, there have been so many. I think one has been related to what we just talked about, which is that people are freaked out. And I think that's understandable, right? You are saying to your employees, hey, we're making these investments in this technology. And, part of the reason that we're bringing in this technology is that things that have been part of your job description that we've been asking you to do every day, we're going to outsource to a machine. And, the optimistic view of that is amazing. We're going to take the worst parts of your job, the boring, repetitive toil of your job, and we're going to take it off your plate so you can spend more of your time doing, exciting, value-driving, person-to-person types of interaction parts of the business. That's the good story. And the bad story is we're just going to take so much time out of everybody's jobs that we're going to need fewer workers in the future, right? And like, honestly, like as someone who thinks about this all the time, right? I don't think any of us can guarantee that we're on either of those paths, right? We don't know. The technology has been changing so quickly over the last couple of years that it's very hard to say with any sort of like, if anyone's definitive, you should have skepticism, right?
100%.
Like 3 years from now, your job will be the same, or 3 years from now, your job won't exist. We don't know, right? And so what we have found is, I think reasonably effective in talking to our employee base is to say, listen, we get that you're scared. We don't know, right? We cannot promise you. We know change is coming. We don't know what it's going to look like. The commitment that we can make to you as a company is to say, we believe that whether your next job is at Indeed or someplace else, to be, competitive and the best in your particular area of focus, right? You're going to need to know how to use these tools, the best in class tools, in the most effective way. And so the commitment we're making as a company is that we're going to like bring you along on this journey, right? We're going to give you the tools, we're going to give you the training, we're going to do all the work that we can to make sure that every one of you is like part of the AI revolution. And like, ideally that's driving tons of business value and growth for Indeed, and like, everyone feels great. But then the worst case scenario, at least, is hopefully like we have prepared you for going off and being an amazing contributor someplace else, if that's the right path, right? But it is hard. Like, it's a hard balance to strike, right? And I'm not gonna lie, the sort of like the media, like CEO tech, there's like some famous person gets up once a month and is like, I'm never hiring another person again because AI will do all of the jobs. And like, that doesn't make my life any easier.
No. Yeah, it's interesting. I agree. And I think it's super important to engage people in every transformation that I've been involved with in my client organizations. The ones that have really embraced this, have been honest with everyone, and have given them the tools and the skills and the support and put them in the driver's seat, they're the ones that are thriving.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Right. I do think what we're finding is that, people always ask in these sorts of conversations, right? Like, what's your advice for what skills employees should learn to prepare themselves for the future of AI? Which is a hard question because all jobs are different. But I do think the one constant is like being comfortable with the uncertainty and the ambiguity, and having the growth mindset that says there is unknown here and I can't control that unknown, but I can go out and control the level at which I engage with these tools, the amount of experimentation I do, and my willingness to rethink the way that I'm doing my job, right? Like the people who have that mindset are going to succeed for sure in the next 5 years, but it's a hard thing to teach.
It is. Yeah, for me, I wrote an entire book about the skills that we need in the future. And if what I was to summarize it, is actually curiosity and humility to some extent, that you actually realize that there's so much change happening all the time.
Yeah.
I need to step back here and try to absorb it and then embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was hard. I'm trying to think of other things that have been very challenging. I mean, I think, I think the other thing is just like some of it doesn't work, right? And I think, I'm lucky to work at a place where, our CEO and our CIO, who's my boss, have said really clearly, very publicly to the company many times, the world is moving quickly. We need to get out and move quickly and experiment. And we recognize that some of those things aren't going to work. And as long as we are fast about realizing that those things aren't working and we make the hard pivot in the face of the data, that's okay, right? You probably can't do that a million times before you get in trouble, right? Some of the things have to work, but I do think that has also been, we've been working with lots of amazing partners, but some of them didn't exist as companies a year and a half ago, right? So you get the product in and you're like, okay, now I need to know if this product can support me across 60 geographies and however many languages, and they're like, oh, wait, not yet. And you're like, okay.
Very true. If anyone listening to us here now is thinking, okay, what's the 1, 2, or 3 takeaways that you would want to give to anyone that is on this transformation journey?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've hit most of them. I would say the first is just this assumption that, like everyone's job is going to change, right? Every one of us is going to be an AI expert. what that means is going to be different. But every one of us can be an AI expert in 3 years,
Yeah.
right? And you need to be preparing for the fact that like you need to help your employees get there, you need to help your customers get there, and you need to get your other stakeholders there, right? And that's the job.
Yeah.
I think the place we started, which is to say like really, really think about like what are the metrics that matter to your business and how do you tie what you're doing with AI to the things you were already measuring, the things that already matter, so that you know whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze. And then the third thing is just like invest like crazy in that sort of like function and role and person specific education. You cannot put the burden of getting up the learning curve on your people.
Fantastic. Really very practical advice. Thank you so much, Hannah, for this.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.